Welcome to Daily Focus. I trust that you had a good night's rest. I am looking forward to today. I hope you are. And I'm always reminded, this is the day that the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. That word rejoice means to joy over and over again, or to find that inner excitement that comes from the fact that Jesus Christ never changes, and my joy is tied to that which cannot change. And so He is faithful. He's omniscient, so He knows everything that's going to happen today. He's sovereign, that means He's in control. He is loving and caring and gracious and merciful, and He has my best interest at heart. And so what a wonderful thing to put our lives into His care and to serve Him for His own glory and out of a heart of love and appreciation. Well, that's where we are this morning, and we're going to finish up, Lord willing, Proverbs chapter 27. And these verses that we're going to talk about really deal with finances. And it's deciding that I'm going to be prudent. The word prudent, as we've talked about, is this wisdom that looks forward, looks ahead, and makes decisions based on that desire of reaching the will of God, doing the will of God, accomplishing the will of God, and doing things according to the principles that are laid out on the path of wisdom. And so he says in Proverbs chapter 27, verse number 23, "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. For riches are not forever, and doth not the crown endure to every generation? The hay appeareth, and the tender grass showeth itself, and herbs of the mountain are gathered. The lambs are for thy clothing, and the goats are the price of the field. And thou shalt have goats' milk enough for thy food, and for the food of thy household, and for the maintenance for thy maidens." And that's where it ends, and it just gives to us several verses in a row that remind us that we have a responsibility to know the state of our family. It's really talking to the head of the household. It's talking to dads, and it is saying, listen, you need to know the state of thy herds and of thy flock. In other words, the idea is you need to know the condition of your family's finances. I realized early on, as I had a dad that taught me the importance of money and and how God designed it to be used so that I could use it for God's glory. I'm thankful that as I've grown in grace and understood the principles of God's Word, I realize that money is not the root of all evil. It's the love of money. But money is talked about a lot in the Bible. It's important to know what God gave us money to do. It's important for us to know what we're not supposed to do with money. It's important for us to be able to use that which God has entrusted to us. Luke 16 calls it the unrighteous mammon. It's just talking about things that are for the here and now. I mean, when we get to heaven, there's not going to be any money. And you're not, and I'm not going to take any of it with us. We're just not. It's something that God entrusts to us here to use here the way that He wants it to be used. And part of that is to use it in a proper way to care for our families. Realizing that lamb's wool is for our clothing. God will give us sufficient to clothe ourselves. The goat is to be able to purchase property and to be able to buy thy fields, and the goat's milk is going to provide enough nourishment for the family and even those that work for the family, and all of those dynamics. But Dad, you got to know how it's supposed to be used. You're going to have to look down the road and make sure that there's sufficient. and that if you're going to run shy, that you're able to go and make up the difference somewhere. And Unfortunately, in our entitlement mindset and our culture, people are always looking around to see who's going to help me out, who's going to bail me out, who's going to help. But that's not God's plan. Really, God's plan is for all of us to be looking around to see who we can help, not looking around saying who's going to help me. And it's not about not helping each other. It's about not reinforcing this entitlement mindset where people want to just be helped by other people's responsibility. A long time ago, early on in Proverbs, I talked about don't become responsible for someone else's irresponsibility. We each have to learn to be responsible. We need to accept personal responsibility. Boy, that is something that is just devastating our culture, is this lack of personal responsibility. The whole idea that we have to give money to Social Security because somehow the government's convinced that we're not wise enough, we're not prudent enough, we're not intelligent enough to actually plan for the future. So therefore, we've got to entrust a segment of our paycheck to the government because they're so responsible, because they've modeled responsibility. I mean, it's just really nonsense. But little by little, we've given up those freedoms. We've given up that responsibility, and we said, okay, someone else take care of me. Somebody else be responsible for that. And that's where I think we find ourselves with the whole pandemic and the whole coronavirus is people are going, okay, tell me what I'm supposed to do. Tell me how I'm supposed to handle this. Tell me how to manage this crisis. But we should just personally be responsible enough to manage it. But that's this whole culture. And so God says, listen, you know the state of your family. It is my responsibility to make sure that my wife can get in her car and believe that it's going to run, to believe that it's going to be mechanically sound. That's my job. It's my job to make sure that when my wife goes to buy groceries, that there's money there to buy groceries. When somebody's sick, it's my responsibility to make sure that there's proper money and coverage to care for us when we're sick. And it's my job to make sure that there's a roof over our head and that roof functions and is right and proper. And these are just parts of God saying, hey, be prudent. Decide that you're going to live according to prudent principles. And know the state of your flock. Know the condition of your family. Know the needs of your family. And make sure you are ahead of the game far enough and that you have provided and prepared for that which is ahead. And so that's a little dynamic about looking forward and knowing that there's sufficient there. God's provided. But we oftentimes waste what he's provided, or we're lazy regarding what we could have done. And then when the need comes, we're looking around to see who can meet, or we're sometimes blaming God for not meeting when it's probably just we've been irresponsible. And so pull up the bootstraps, trust the Lord, love him, and serve him, and be prudent. That's the lesson for today.